right, so good afternoon. This is Tony Cho, founder and chairman of Metro One, also a co-founder of the Wynwood Business Improvement District, here with my colleague and friend and compatriot, Albert Garcia, the chairman of the Wynwood Business Improvement District, and also of Wynwood Ventures as well. And what other titles am I missing, Albert?
No, I think those are good enough, Tony.
Awesome.
My favorite one is Friends. That's the one I love the most. So
awesome. So thanks for being here this Friday afternoon, celebrating 15 years of pioneering with Metro One. We've known each other at least a decade, possibly more. And, your family has been in Wynwood for, a very long time, longer than many people who, call Wynwood their home and who have now made it their place of business and who have been involved in the process for, a long time. So tell us, what was it like in Wynwood back in the day?
So full disclosure, I'm 43 years old and my parents' history predates me. So I'm not going to age them, but just to give you a sense of how long we've been around the neighborhood. They actually met when they were in high school. My dad had a job at a shoe factory here in Wynwood. That was his gig, and that's all he knew. And after he graduated high school and went into college, just went full, head on into the shoe business. And then that kind of just started our entry into being not only a owner operator of real estate, commercial real estate in Wynwood, but also one of the largest companies in the United States that was headquartered in Wynwood, that was manufacturing footwear, fast fashion footwear for women. And our customers spanned the globe, but primarily were in Latin America and in the Caribbean. So as a kid growing up, summers during elementary and junior high, when I was trying to earn a few extra, dollars here and there, I would work in the warehouse and of course sneak away and play on the streets because there were other kids like me whose families were also operating like-minded businesses in the neighborhood. And it was a very thriving community. We hear about the last 5-10 years of Wynwood, but most people don't realize that when you go back 40, 50 years, this place, this community, this 50-block district was thriving and as economically vital to the South Florida economy, albeit in a completely different context. And unfortunately, due to market forces and globalization, those factories almost all came to a screeching halt in the early to mid 90s. And that, of course, set the stage for everything that we now, of course, know as the Wynwood Arts District. It was that abandonment that opened the door to revitalization and the introduction of street art in a very unfiltered, very genuine way, which started to draw people and investment back into the area.
100%. So your family were really the pioneers, some of the old pioneers of the neighborhood, and it was, it's been a pleasure getting to know them and to have their legacy live on through you and the work that you're doing to really further the interests of this incredibly dynamic and exciting arts district that is known all over the world. It's a brand, at this point. And when I started investing in Wynwood, or started to get acquainted with Wynwood, which is now, I'm aging myself and dating myself, is almost 20 years ago. 2000, 2001. I bought my first building with Ruben Matz, which was an 8-unit apartment building on 27th Street. And may he rest in peace. Ruben Matz was a very important member of our community, and he was one of our first agents at Metro One. And so that was my first foray into the neighborhood. It was completely different back then, and dangerous at times, and very blighted. And as you said, manufacturing had left, and I understand that in the 80s, a number of the Watts riots had happened in and around Wynwood, and there actually was a off-ramp. There was an exit on 29th Street, and which the BID and others have examined about reopening and have explored basically an access there. But Wynwood has great history, and like the manufacturing stories throughout the country that have gone overseas, or like you said, through market factors and globalization, we saw, these industrial, what I would call urban core neighborhoods, be left fallow and neglected, and had become dangerous areas in many, many cities, until street artists discovered them. And then folks like Nina Arias, and WADA, which was the precursor. WADA is the Wynwood Arts District Association, which was the precursor to the current, Wynwood Business Improvement District. And actually, Andres Nava, our current managing director's brother, was the manager of WADA for a while.
That's right.
So Jose Nava. So, and when we first met, when was the bid? What year was the bid actually officially consecrated and passed? Because we had to actually vote it in through the city of Miami.
Sure. So we were officially born in October of 2013, but as you said, the work started beforehand with the establishment of the Wynwood Arts District Association. That was really the first time that members of the old and the new community started to come together to articulate a common vision. It wasn't fully fleshed out, but it was the platform that allowed us to start to come in together and start rowing in the same direction, if you will. At the time, we were focused on clean and safe, particularly security, stabilizing the neighborhood. Everybody would, contribute dollars, and we would hire private security to patrol the neighborhood. And then we also hired women from the Lotus House, which is a remarkable program down here in the city of Miami, to help keep our sidewalks clean. The Women of Wynwood, we call them. So.
And they had their beautiful pink outfits.
That's right.
Around.
Now they were purple and pink, but yeah, that program continues on. The BID continued it. But that kind of started several years before 2013. So I would say as a community, we started to come together, over 15, 17 years ago, to start to imagine what can be. And then of course, when we created the BID in 2013, that's when we really put our money where our mouth was, because we created a special taxing district. That's what a BID is. So all the commercial property owners in the neighborhood said, we're going to buy into this vision, and we're literally going to invest in ourselves. And those collective funds then accelerated the vision-making process and allowed us to start making some policy decisions and recommendations to the city and the county to implement much necessary changes, including zoning, which led the way to everything that you and your team have so remarkably helped shepherd in this neighborhood.
And we helped you broker the sale of your real estate and your business, which then you parlayed into other investments that you've now made in the neighborhood and in other places, I would imagine. And I remember going back, what year did we close the Mega Shoe transaction?
I believe that was in, I'd say could have been 2015 maybe?
Probably.
Or 2014?
2015.
How far? Around there, I think that makes, and we were owner users exclusively. All of our warehouses were fulfillment centers or warehouses. At one point, they were actually factory space for us. So we weren't quote unquote, developers. We were using them for our core business. And then when we met, I remember this is before the BID, and you were articulating, all these cool tenants that were coming in and a vision. And honestly, my dad and I, when we first met, you thought you were crazy, not like crazy, like mentally, just like, what? This guy must be nuts. Does he know where he is? He took a wrong exit. This is not a neighborhood that's safe or a place where you want to have activations at night or convince people to come and walk, unless they have a craving for violence or things that are not necessarily in line with like pleasantries of shopping and walking and enjoying a neighborhood. And that's, I think, a testament to folks like you and Tony Goldman and David Lombardi and many others that really convinced us, kind of that older generation, that previous user class, that Wynwood's brightest days were ahead of it. We were just kind of traumatized by the exodus of our industry, of our entrepreneurship driven economy, which was to create these manufacturing design jobs in Wynwood, and saw them all kind of disappear. And we just didn't have hope, right? We didn't know. So thanks to your efforts at Metro One, and yeah, I think it says a lot that you headquartered your office here. I mean, you really made this your business, and it wasn't simply about brokering deals. It was about revitalization and building a new community.
Totally. No, it felt really exciting when I signed my lease in October 2005. No, yeah, October 2005. We're 15 years. That's the right date. In Bill Ramos's warehouse on the rail, which is now slated to become potentially the first commuter stop in Miami off the FEC Brightline Tri-Rail rail. It was very sketchy back then. And, we basically, we went into a place that was a tile company before, and Lenny Kravitz had a studio next door where he would just jam and they would do graphic design. And it was just very, it was kind of very Lower East Side Manhattan, very Brooklyn before it was well known.
And Midtown didn't exist.
And Midtown didn't exist. That was where all the containers were, at that time. And we have photos from Meg Pukel, who was a local photographer who took shots of those old containers that they used to do images on and graffiti. And, it felt like you were part of something gritty and raw, and there was this burgeoning art scene. And, I had met this artist, Esther Giori, living in a warehouse in Little Haiti, who had basically sold her penthouse at Portofino Towers and then moved into a warehouse on 4th Court. She started dating this 30-year-old Jamaican sculptor, Hunk, and, they would throw awesome parties. And so I was exposed early on to this creative class and this burgeoning maker culture, creative culture. And it was really exciting to be part of that. And what blows my mind the most, and I was having a conversation with Steve Rhodes, another local legendary investor whose our careers have paralleled and we've been working together for a long time. But he also said that he thought I was crazy. He said he never believed that this vision would come to pass. But he said that, it was outlandish what we had talked about, but he said now Wynwood far exceeded what we ever expected would happen. So it's really amazing when you believe in something and there's momentum and you get the right people behind it. And even though all the different stakeholders had their own interests, we were all aligned, I think, or we all are aligned around a vision of an arts district that is, dynamic and innovative and caters to small independent businesses and craft, and so I was always, as you remember, very vocal against national brands and the Starbucks and I remember when Subway was calling every owner on 2nd Avenue to do a deal, and I was lobbying against them, and
we were all picking up our phones, begging folks not to sign that deal. Yeah.
And like you talked about, the manufacturing has gone away, but things like manufactured-enabled retail, like the Panther Coffees of the world and the others have emerged as these kind of craft bespoke businesses that have really been the lifeblood and the culture of Wynwood, which is now being sported, worldwide. Case in point, Zach the Baker, who Metro One sourced and brought from Hialeah to the Goldmans, who ended up financing his build out, which was probably the best deal they did. It was a percentage rent deal. And Zach the Baker is an international celebrity, and it's really value add to the entire neighborhood and the entire Wynwood story. So yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Oh, 100%. I mean, even those of us that started to articulate that common vision when we set up the BID in 2013, in our wildest imaginations, we never thought that, 7 years later, we would say that over 5.5 million annual visitors are coming to Wynwood. I mean, that's a remarkable number. When you go back to 2013, and the other day I was going through our old notes, we were high-fiving because we broke 100,000 annual visitors. So to go from 100,000 to over 5.5 million in 7 years is a remarkable growth rate. And I think it's a testament not just to the power of revitalization, but it says a lot about what you said a moment ago, which is really, when you have a vision and you have a community behind, to really push through to make that vision a reality, it's a powerful thing. And we can all see it now. We can all, point to it, and each of us have left a unique mark. Even you, myself, many others that we've had the privilege of working with, and those that have passed away, unfortunately, in the time since. It's just the beginning. When we look at the next 5, next 10, next 15, 20 years, I bet if you and I got back together again and had one of these calls to celebrate Metro One's 25th anniversary, we're going to be our heads will be spinning when we look at Wynwood and look back 25 years, right? So that's really what we're focusing on now. We're setting the framework for the future, for the next generation, to make sure that everything that we've started here doesn't go back. Because that really, to me, speaks really personally, because we lived through that dark age, through that moment of time when we went from a very high to a very low. And my parents and I have always said, our commitments to this neighborhood are to make sure that everything we do, our lasting impact, is to make sure that this neighborhood never has to go through that again. So we always want to make sure that we're moving in the right direction, and more importantly, that we don't forget where we came from, and that this neighborhood always remain accessible to everybody from all walks of life, strollers to walkers, everybody in between, the full spectrum as far as socioeconomic framework. That's what's really special about what we've created here. To say that this is another, Williamsburg or another, environment where we've just cobbled together retail and called it a day and high five, I think you missed the mark. If that's what you think we're all about here. This has always been about creating a world-class city within a larger city that sets the tone and raises the bar for others to follow. And I think everything that we've done, from our neighborhood revitalization district plan back in 2015 to our recently approved Wynwood Streetscape Master Plan, which really speaks to climate resiliency, sustainability, adaptability, all the things that we know as a community and as a state and as a nation we're facing, we're right there at the forefront. And I like to also remind, myself and you and others, we talk about 5.5 annual visitors. Well, that's one big point of reference. But I think the most remarkable one for the next 5 to 10 to 20 years is that the Wynwood Midtown Edgewater area, our neighboring communities around Wynwood, we're now the fastest growing region in Miami-Dade County and one of the fastest growing in the United States from a population standpoint. So just thinking back 10, 15 years, if you told somebody this is going to be the epicenter of the urban core of Miami-Dade County and one of the fastest growing regions in the United States, they would think you're nuts. And by the way, I would be one of those people.
I was saying that
we were crazy.
And I was saying that to you in end of 2000s as well.
Yeah.
That's why people thought I was crazy. But you could feel it. Similarly, I've had a couple of, now probably 3 times in my life where I've been in the right place at the right time and part of something special. In the 90s, it was South Beach. It was a special place, especially in nightlife and hospitality, with all the celebrities and the Versaces and the Madonnas, and nightlife was really magical. And especially in my late teens and early 20s, that's how I really got started and parlayed into real estate, was because I made a lot of connections. And really what most interested me is all the creative connections I made, all the artists and all of the performers and the graphic designers, and everybody who was making and doing interesting things came through nightlife. And then they retreated at a certain moment when it became too commercial, as always happens with the flight of the creatives, and they go to different areas. And so we were promoting to them to come to affordable places that were for large creative spaces and warehouses for artists. So I became a promoter of nightlife to a promoter of neighborhoods. And that's essentially.
I love that story, by the way.
And that's what, and building community. Obviously, you know my background. I grew up in a commune that was started by my grandmother in the 70s, and everything is about community. Without community, what is a building? And people ask me,
there's no soul. That's the soul. That's why the neighborhood is alive. That's the beating heart.
Exactly. It has soul, it has character, and it has a community. And the community is that soul and that character. And I'm really, proud of how Wynwood, and the stewards like yourself and us have been able to kind of preserve that character. Now, there's things that are outside of our control. We all know that a lot of capital, and especially institutional and private equity money, particularly from New York, has come in and paid big numbers and big prices, which, I think for, the Puerto Ricans and those who bought their homes for $20,000 and $30,000, who sold them for $500,000 or $1 million or $1.5 million, or those like your folks and others like the Matranis who took significant risk, and really, they waited out the storm when it was very unsafe, in the 80s and 90s to be in Wynwood. I mean, the Rubels came to Wynwood to buy their DEA facility, and there were gun holes in the wall everywhere. Literally gun holes in the wall.
That's the drug enforcement agency, for those that don't know DEA. I mean, this is like the heavy stuff. This is not like the daycare center. Yeah.
This is not Mickey Mouse, drama. This is prime time, crime, and some serious stuff. And like you said, there were a lot of efforts that went into making Wynwood clean and safe. And there were a number of setbacks, and we really bonded together as a community. What I'm most proud of too is, developers often get a bad rap of, gentrifying or pushing people out or misappropriating culture, which oftentimes happens, and there's validity to it. But the process, from the beginning with Wynwood was a group of progressive thinking, aligned investors, property owners who really believed in the creative class and artistry and craft, retail, and food and beverage, and really helped curate collectively a neighborhood. And we could have gone for higher buildings and more density, but we didn't. We decided to do it at a more human scale. And we really created a public benefits program that de-emphasized the automobile. And I'm so happy to see that the work that you've continued doing with the streetscape plan, which I remember when we were talking about the Wooners back in 2013. We were walking around with the different, urban planning groups and Juan Morat and all the people that we've been working through, and Architectonica. And there's been a cast of characters who have come through, and those many great, fiery meetings with Tony Goldman, may he rest in peace as well. He was one of my mentors and somebody who really inspired me.
And his legacy continues on, with his children, with his daughter and his son, with Jessica and Joey, and of course, Janet and that whole family, who continue to invest and who continue to be our North Star in the neighborhood.
Yeah, the Goldmans are truly a beacon of and an example of incredibly thoughtful placemaking and real commitment to the arts and culture, and from the lab to
which was the first co-working space in all of Miami, in Wynwood.
The first co-working space, and also the place where I think the innovators and the entrepreneurs really gathered, which I think that also kind of helped spark the innovation ecosystem, which something I'm very passionate about in our project in Magic City. But really, a lot of that innovation and ideating around technology and social innovation came out of the lab. So, and a lot of that had to do with landlords not trying to be greedy and charge, the most amount of rent, but really growing with the neighborhood. And I think, that's what I'm most proud of, being part of something where it wasn't just a greedy land grab. Everybody worked to see the long-term value of the neighborhood, and it's really, it's paying out in spades, and for those who have stuck it out and stuck with it and believe in the vision. And it's been a really great journey to be part of. And an example, and I know that the Wynwood NRD zoning in particular has garnered national and international accolades for being a very progressive zoning overlay. And it was a very thoughtful and productive process that we all went through, and very collaborative too. Not without its challenges and snares, but
well, of course, we had to build consensus. How do you do that when you have, such a eclectic mix of developers, of legacy owners, retailers all, piled up in a room, and everybody has to agree that they want to go in this direction when everybody's saying, let's go in all these other directions. And that's what community building is all about. And it ran a long journey. And the reason why it's so successful is because it was genuinely designed from the very beginning to truly reflect the vision of its stakeholders. It wasn't a top-down vision. It wasn't one held by the largest property owner or the one that had the loudest voice in the room, although all those voices and all those entities tried, of course, to pull the vision in their direction. But to their credit and to everybody who was engaged, the end result was one that really set us up, again, I would say, for the next 20 to 25 years to continue to be a special place. I think what folks that come and just enjoy the neighborhood don't realize, there's so much behind the scenes planning and building a community, and the effort of revitalization is a difficult job, one that requires hours and hours, days upon months upon years of continued steadfast work. And it really, I hate to say takes a village, it takes 50 city blocks in this case, to really make sure that you have buy-in, and a village, buy-in year round, year after year, because as new folks come in, you mentioned, all these new players are coming in and developers are coming in, and, they have their own vision too. And, they're making huge investments, so they're entitled to absolutely have a voice too. But to their credit, when they come here, one of the things that I think you can probably attest to this is that what draws them to Wynwood is also the fact that there is a plan, that there is a community, that there is a common vision, that they're a part of something that's bigger than just their parcel or their project. And it's that assurance that we're all kind of in this together that I think is what has also led to our remarkable success. In our NRD zoning, you mentioned, we kind of limited the heights, but we also made sure that the character of the neighborhood was codified, meaning, the industrial character, the artistic nature of this neighborhood isn't going to go away, even if somebody tried, because you can't any longer. It's law now. So all projects have to come before us. We have a brilliant group of artists and business owners and professional designers and architects that have to vet all these projects to make sure that we don't lose ourselves in our success, which was one of our biggest fears that you and I and others used to always say would have been our downfall.
Terrified. And I think that there's opportunity actually to reverse the trend, because let's face it, very few independent businesses can afford, say pre-COVID, and we'll get into COVID there in a minute, but very few businesses could afford to open in Wynwood because prices have gotten, very high, and a lot of it has to do, and a lot of people don't understand, triple net charges and pass-throughs. When your basis is high, your effective property tax are going to be very high. And so in some cases, people are paying $10 to $20 a square foot just in property tax because of how much they paid. So all these institutional private equity real estate guys have come in, paid big numbers, and we brokered a lot of those deals. So I'm not going to say that it wasn't good. And they bring in a lot of their own ideas too, and their own tenants, and brought in diversity, which I think is great. But
they build and they develop.
They've developed
forward. Right.
I brought Related, the first deal that Related did, and everybody was, Related is, they're the institutional developer, or the 10,000 pound gorilla of the neighborhood, and they've really added a lot of value. And now, JP
Perez is on our board of directors, and
he's on the board of directors, and he really has been spearheading because he loves Wynwood, because it resonates with his generation, our generation of more kind of the creative endeavors, which Wynwood was small potatoes for a big developer like Related, until we convinced them and brought them to the neighborhood and sold them the dream, and others have come in. And I think what has been good about Wynwood is that the ground rules have been laid and codified, like you said. So the character is not going to go away. There's going to be industrial buildings forever, because they're so valuable, and people have sold their development.
And our policies incentivize them to stay that way too. So there's now options for a small lot owner not to have to wait to get taken out. They can monetize their density. There's other ways that they can add on their footprint without, adding to a parking constraint or requirement to build beyond what they can probably afford. So we always wanted to see this mishmash of heights and forms and building types. It was never designed to be a uniform utopia like other redevelopment projects throughout South Florida and beyond. So to your point, those are the guardrails, right? That we had to work really hard to build, to fortify. And then of course, we also wanted to have flexibility so that folks that come in, new developers, can also interpret it in their own way and still stay within that construct. And that gives us that diversity of architecture as well as program.
Yeah. And I mean, elements like street art must be integrated into the building typology and that type of stuff, I think. And you have to go through a Wynwood design review board, which is great, just to even give people guidance. Someone who's coming from the Midwest or another area that's not familiar with the culture and the story of place, because Wynwood has a real story of place and that predates all of us, that even predates your parents. There's a history there, there's a culture, there's a fabric that is evolving, that we're all co-creating, that we're all part of. And I want to go back to this discussion around really creating a space for independent businesses and artists and creative, because that's one thing that we're addressing with my project on 29th and 2nd with the Collective, which is a co-living building from a group out of London. That's a fantastic group that does great projects. They have projects all over the world, Berlin, and New York, and really about building community. And they asked me right from the beginning, what is Wynwood lacking? What does it need? And I said, we need space for artists and creative that's affordable. I said, if we can solve for that or be part of that solution, that would be fantastic. So that, as well as, environmental considerations with building materials and energy use and, well standards, LEED standards, passive house, and all of these other, modalities are things that I've also been pushing for, because, I'm passionate about the environment. But what do you think is being done, and what do you think can be done more to ensure that there's a seat at the table for residents of all socioeconomic backgrounds, and that there's a seat at the table for creatives? Like, what are you seeing happening? Or, from your lens, how do you think that we mitigate the impacts of the gentrification, of the increasing property values, and keeping it diverse so that it doesn't go the route of other neighborhoods that just became too expensive, over commercialized, and not really viable, and they lose their cool factor?
So I really appreciate that question, Tony, because that goes to the root of why my family and I remain so excited and committed to Wynwood's future, and it really justifies the efforts, the hours of time that I invest personally at the BID to ensure that we make sure that this neighborhood remains accessible, right? So there's multiple ways that we do that. So through the BID recently, besides the Streetscape Master Plan, we made a series of amendments to the NRD1, which were just recently adopted by the City of Miami Commission, specific to your question. So affordable and workforce housing product is something that is sorely lacking in this neighborhood. So just a couple of weeks ago, we had the privilege to bring into the neighborhood the first affordable workforce housing project that was also approved by the City of Miami Commission, which is from a group by the name of Magellan Housing, and they teamed with Udonis Aslam from the Miami Heat, and they're building that project on the southeast quadrant of Wynwood. And going back to 2015, when we created our public trust funds, these are trust funds that developers have to pay into to avail themselves of additional story heights in their buildings, as well as to pay down parking requirements. Those funds have been growing, and a third of every dollar that goes into our public benefits trust fund is set aside for affordable workforce housing projects. So, going back to 2015, we were wrestling with this question, and we didn't have all the answers then, and we might not have them all today, but we started to leave the resources in place. So as we started to figure this out, we would have the means to implement change. And with the brand new amendments, we've also now added additional incentives for the private sector to come in and work together with government, with the public sector, to address the affordability crisis. I mean, South Florida is one of the most rapidly growing areas in the country. We mentioned how Wynwood is like literally the epicenter of that. And there is an affordability crisis in South Florida. So how do we retain these
affordability crisis worldwide?
Yeah, worldwide. Yeah, no, this is not unique to Miami or the United States. But in Wynwood's case, you know, we talk about the creative class and the artists and those that, you know, were here 15 years ago. How do we keep them here? How do we make sure that they, you know, remain a part of the neighborhood? And how do we ensure that we don't become another community of just condos and, you know, high class living standards, which is not at all in our DNA. So now there are new mechanisms in place to encourage more of this product type. So I think when we reconnect over the next couple of years, we're going to look back and see that that one affordable housing project that just was approved was a pioneer project, but set the way for 5 or 10 more to come. And there's already discussions now that I'm a part of where there's going to probably be 2 or 3 more that are going to be announced very soon. So, you know, that's one way that we keep the neighborhood accessible.
Is that part of the rezoning that's happening for the increased density for workforce and affordable housing unit? But that hasn't passed.
Right, 100%.
But it hasn't passed yet. The legislation is being workshopped, but has it passed?
No, it passed. That was part of our series of, yeah, it passed.
That was part of the series.
Streetscape. Yeah, it was a package of amendments, which was the streetscape. That gets a lot of attention because the one-offs are very popular and long awaited, like you said, since 2013. So stay tuned. Those are coming, I promise. But the amendments to the NRD one that are specific to affordable workforce housing product, that went through as well. And, you know, I'm just as excited, if not more, about that than the Streetscape Master Plan, because that really speaks to fundamentals of your question.
Yeah, no, it's a game changer. I think really solving the affordability crisis is really critical. And I think that's one mechanism, like you talked about. You know, I'm somebody who's a big proponent of mixed income housing, you know, and cross-generational housing. I think we've done a terrible job.
We're going to see a lot of that in Wynwood. I mean, you know, some projects that have already been announced, that's their thesis.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's great. And I think because of the work that was done, the groundwork that has been done, you know, dating back now 10 years from when the bids probably inception was happening, you know, that's what it takes to actually work together to create the resources, the funds that can help steward.
It's not happen overnight. Yeah, this is a slow motion moving machine, but it's focused and it continues to move, obviously, and evolve. And there'll be other challenges. So, you know, we touched upon climate change and all the challenges that comes with developing in South Florida. You know, obviously there's rising sea levels. I'll point out that Wynwood sits atop the highest, floodplain in Miami-Dade County. So not that we're excited about saying that, but it's important to point out, but we're also taking it as seriously as the coastal communities. Because
I think that's just a credit to Henry Flagler for being smart enough to put his rail on the ridge.
Exactly.
In Florida. But I really, you know, people talk about this, you know, this whole 18 feet above sea level as the Florida mountain, same with Little Haiti and other areas. And that had no bearing for me whatsoever of why I invested in those areas. And truthfully, if Miami Beach starts to flood, which is one of the gems of our whole region.
We have bigger issues.
You think people are going to want to live in this area? Everybody's going to mass exodus. So really, we need to focus on scaling solutions
100%.
on both adaptation and mitigation. And there's a lot of smart people and companies and technologies that are being developed that will be scaled. And it's not a foregone conclusion. We have an uncertain future, as you well know. But I'm hopeful and I'm optimistic as long as people recognize that we do have a challenge and we do have that climate change is real and sea level rise is real, then we can tackle the problem like we've done, you know, time and time again as when humanity comes together, a community comes together. That's what people need to wake up at.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, 2020 probably marks one of the most challenging, unusual, wild, difficult year in
probably
modern,
like 5,000 more adjectives to describe 2020.
in certainly my lifetime, and probably this entire century, previous century combined, is historic events that we never anticipated. And, so how has COVID-19 impacted Wynwood from your perspective and in the region at large? And what do you see as the outcomes, both positive and negative, as a result of it?
So I feel like Wynwood was giving, if you look back, was given a blessing in disguise. Back in 2016, we had the unfortunate pleasure of being the welcome mat to Zika in the United States, in the 48 states.
Zika in our neighborhood, right?
Yes.
I remember that. That was such a hoax. Talk about a hoax.
And, everybody talks about Dr. Fauci, from the NIH, today. And by the way, it was Dr. Fauci back in 2016 who put a little red box over Wynwood. And it was the first time in the history of this country where the federal government advised its citizens to avoid travel to a portion of this country. And that happened to be us. So it was a very scary time, as you well know, having lived through it with me and others, where literally overnight, the streets were empty. Parking was an easy thing because there was no cars on the streets. And our businesses were just overnightly just disrupted and on the brink of being out of business. And as a community, we had to come together to mitigate the challenge and figure out exactly if there really was even a Zika outbreak, and get behind that to eradicate it and ensure that we could come back and reopen for business. We were like top news for multiple days and weeks of all the network newscasts, cable newscasts. Every international media outlet was covering Wynwood for the wrong reasons. We were here trying to get attention for our street art, and all they wanted to talk about was Zika and pregnant people and all these crazy things. So after that whole crisis, we created an emergency plan because we thought this was going to be par with the course. Every year we were going to have to deal with this. Thankfully, that never happened, but the plan was in place to deal with another type of infection or some sort of non-physical damage catastrophe, because even then what we saw was that government wasn't adequately prepared to deal with this. It wasn't like a hurricane where you had roofs that were blown off and walls that were thrown down. It was an economic catastrophe, very similar to what we've seen with COVID. So when we started getting the beginnings of like what we'd say like in a hurricane forecast model for COVID, this was coming and it could be bad and you have to get ready, we had a plan ready to go. I'll never forget, it was March 13th, we had a bid board meeting. And I remember we had folks from the city and the county present, and two of our business owners were asking, hey, about this COVID thing, what's the plan? And I said, look, I don't know what's gonna happen. This could leave in a couple of weeks. But we have a plan in place in case it lasts 6 or 8 months. And we put it into action that day. Well, 2 days later, county and city started putting in curfews and distance requirements, things at the time were foreign to all of us, but now have become just part of our way of life. And we knew that the next thing was going to be getting aid from the government for our businesses. So when these loan programs started to come up, we already had direct lines to the federal government, to the state, and to the county to make sure that our businesses were front of line to get those dollars, because we never got dollars from the government after Zika. And I'm fortunate to say that 98% of our businesses got their loans the first time around, which I know was very difficult for many other businesses that were not as fortunate. But in Wynwood, we had a plan. And that's, by the way, I think a testament to having a bid, right. Because that's the insurance policy on a rainy day. You take it for granted when the sun's out, but when it's all hell breaking loose, you're thankful you've got that bid to keep you sheltered and to protect your business and your property investments. So for the last 8 months, it's been about innovation, resetting, rethinking, repositioning, and just being more creative to figure out how we're going to emerge from this much stronger and at an accelerated rate. Get to where we already wanted to go. And that's, I think, the same for any business that's gone through this the right way. They use it as an opportunity to reinvent themselves. And that's when we did the finishing touches on our streetscape master plan and did our amendments to the NRD1 for affordability and workforce housing. That's what we spent the last 6 months working on, and making sure that we had a recovery program in place for our retailers and our restaurants to weather this COVID storm.
Yeah, adversity is the mother of all invention. And I think that this time period for us, and although there has been an unfortunate, way too many people have succumbed to the virus, and many more have gotten sick from it. There's also a silver lining, because I think all of us, myself included, have reevaluated what's important and really,
in our personal lives, in our professional worlds. I mean,
all around, 360 degrees. And I think it's going to go back to my original instincts of, and then you see all of these large malls and retailers going out of business that you would never think, and one after the next. And I had always said, you need to focus on the butcher, the baker, the barber, the kind of small business people, that, the basics of Main Street. And here we are back to the basics. It's all about the butcher, the baker, the barber, the independent, artisanal craft, and that's what the market wants. Why? Because you can get anything delivered to your door same day by Amazon. So if you don't create an experience for people to get in their car, battle traffic, find parking, pay for it, then they're not going to come. So Wynwood is an experiential neighborhood. It's exciting at every corner. There's something you don't see.
You don't drive past 10 Wynwoods to get to our Wynwood. Doesn't work.
And Wynwood has inspired other neighborhoods, not only in Miami, like Alapata nearby, I think, is as a result of a lot of development there, more stuff happening in Midtown, and Wynwood Norte now in the new district right to the north. And
about that too, yeah.
I think all districts in Miami and many districts around the world have been informed by, the great work that Wynwood has done. So I feel comforted to know that, my friend and colleague and former client, of Metro One is, at the helm and stewarding this vision that we've all been co-creating for decades. And I do agree with you, the best is yet to come. And I'm really excited to see, what the future holds. And I think these latest announcements, of the Wynwood Master Plan streetscape going through, along with the affordable housing, the efforts made to ensure that there's public transportation and that there's a train stop in Wynwood. I know you put a lot of effort into that. We worked with you on that as well. So really representing the interests of not only Wynwood, but the surrounding community, Midtown and Edgewater and the urban core in general.
That's how we keep it accessible too. It's a public transit system. We're blessed, but we don't realize some people can't afford Uber and Lyft. That's an expensive proposition, let alone owning a car. So when you talk about accessibility, it's also how do you bring more people in that perhaps up until now haven't been able to afford a means to find us, to get here, to rediscover us time and again, right? So all of these things are critical pieces. I just want to say, having the privilege of getting to know you over all these years, we've celebrated weddings, we've celebrated many exciting, business opportunities together, but more importantly, being able to see you really as an entrepreneur and as a visionary, Tony, over the last 15 years, from where you began with Metro One to where you are today, and the course that you've charted for yourself, your team, and your business and your family moving into the future, is all inspiring, because you're a citizen not just of Miami, but of the world. You bring best practices, best ideas, world-class developers and investments back home, right to your backyard. Folks like yourself in other disciplines would just say, that's it, check the box, I'm out, did well. But you come back and you reinvest, and you raise the bar for yourself and for all of us. So on behalf of, my family, and on behalf of, our community, congratulations to you. Thank you, because really, honestly, you have played a pivotal role in my family's success, in this community's successes, and of many, many, many others who may not even realize they owe you a debt of gratitude, because you have really left your mark here. And I hope you're proud. I know you're proud of what you've accomplished, and we're rooting for you. And I can't wait to see what you will do next over the next several years. I'm sure it's going to be even more special than the last 50.
You're making me emotional, Alberta. We've done a lot together. It means a lot for you to say that, and I hope that I've really, contributed, and I hope to continue to contribute. And I'm very proud of being part of the Wynwood community, and I'll always be passionate about it and its future, and I'll always be there to help people who want to make it their home or who want to invest. I'm just as passionate as I was, 20 years ago, or 17 years ago when I bought the first building with Ruben Matz, and we had to, fight to collect rents every month, and battle ourselves in strange conditions with really bad streets with trash everywhere. And so we've been through it. We've definitely been through it, and we've all made sacrifices, and pioneers don't always, become successes, because
That's
a lot
true.
of it.
We're like martyrs. So sometimes we don't have a happy ending.
Been through some ups and downs for sure. We've all been ups and downs and sideways, and down markets.
We've been there for each other on some low points and challenging moments in our lives too. So as a friend, I think we're battle tested. To your point, we're fighting the good fight. That I firmly believe. And it's not easy. It's thankless to a great degree. We're not asking for pity, because we're all very successful in our own sectors and our own businesses, but we go above and beyond where most people just don't. And that also shows a commitment to leadership in your community. So again, that's where I say thank you to you, because sometimes it gets lonely when you're doing this work, because you forget who you're doing it for, when you don't feel that you have others that are behind you and beside you doing this. And you have been continually leading by example, and you've inspired me and many others. So, I really tip my hat off to you and your family and your colleagues and those that have been a part of your story, because without them, I don't know what my successes would be like today.
Thank you, Albert. You've been, a really cherished friend and ally, and, I really adore your family, and just really, down to earth, good natured, salt of the earth people that really care about people. I think that's what it boils down to. So you've been an inspiration to me and my wife, Jimena, and our family. I'm really indebted and grateful to you continuing to carry the torch, and the work you do day in and day out, meeting with tenants and investors and dealing with city challenges and all kinds of things that arise on a daily basis. We're dealing with issues. I'm dealing with half the issues that you're dealing with, because you're at least in Wynwood, and you're keeping me apprised and letting me know where we can represent and where we can speak up and where we make sure we're not underrepresented. So Wynwood should be very grateful to have you at the helm, and I feel very comforted. So I'm really excited for the future of Wynwood. I'm really excited to continue working alongside you. And I'm just very thankful for you for doing the work, and for your commitment and your passion to the neighborhood and the people of the neighborhood, and fighting the good fight, and really caring about kind of everybody of every background, because diversity, as you know, and equity and justice is really a big part of what is going to move us forward as a civilization, as a humanity. And I think Wynwood has done a lot right. We've all made mistakes, don't get me wrong, but I think that we're not too proud to learn from those and really try to make it better. I think Wynwood is an incredible case study worldwide of responsible urban revitalization that has gone right. And it hasn't gone perfectly, but I think it's gone right.
Community building.
100%.
To it. The planning and the community building, that nexus.
In parallel.
Yep.
Yeah. So thank you so much, my friend. I look forward to 15 more years and beyond. Send my best to your family.
Thank you,
Charlie, and we will be in touch.
Congrats again, Tony. You've earned this and many more accolades. And to everybody that's watching, this guy's a very special person. If you don't know him already, keep an eye, because he's going to continue to amaze you with his work and his passion and his commitment. So Tony, again, heartfelt congrats to you on the Big 15 and many more.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. Have a great weekend.
You too. Bye-bye.